Have you ever looked at the ocean and seen nothing but a vast, empty blue? Most of us view the sea as a barrier, a void between continents, or perhaps a place for vacation. But what if I told you that beneath that blue surface, lying on the dark, silent seabed, are the literal veins of our civilization? If these veins were to be severed tomorrow, your world wouldn't just slow down, it would stop. Your bank account would be inaccessible, your power grid could collapse, and the very internet you are using to watch this video would vanish. There are many theories about the next global conflict involving space or nuclear weapons. But today I will present to you 3 key reasons why the next catastrophic attack will not come from the sky, but from the bottom of the ocean. By the end of this video, you will understand how the most advanced society in history has built its entire foundation. On a series of glass threads no thicker than a garden hose, and why our enemies have already mapped every single one of them. Do you understand how vulnerable you are right now? Because while you are looking at the stars, the real threat is lurking 5 miles down. To understand the scale of this problem, we first have to dispel a massive myth. When you think of the internet, do you think of satellites? Most people do. They imagine data beaming through the air to Starlink or GPS satellites. But guess what? Satellites handle less than 1% of global communications. 1%, the other 99% of everything you do online, every email, every bank transfer, every video call, travels through subsea fiber optic cables. There are roughly 500 of these cables, stretching over 1.4 million kilometers across the ocean floor. If you took all these cables and tied them together, they would reach from the Earth to the Moon and back, and then wrap around the Earth several more times. Do you see the magnitude of this network? We have built a global brain, but all its neurons are lying exposed on the muddy floor of the abyss. Why is this important? Because we have created a single point of failure for the entire human race. Let's look at the anatomy of one of these cables. You might imagine a massive armored pipe, but the reality is much more fragile. At the center of these cables are tiny strands of glass, each no thicker than a human hair. These are the fibers that carry the light signals. To protect them, they are wrapped in layers of petroleum jelly, copper, steel, and polyethylene. In the deep ocean, where the water is still, these cables are often no wider than 20 millimeters. That is roughly the size of a standard garden hose. Can you imagine that? The entire financial stability of the United Kingdom or the United States depends on a piece of plastic the size of your thumb lying in international waters, where anyone can reach it. In shallower waters, we add more armor to protect them from anchors and fishing nets, but in the deep, they are virtually defenseless. Why does this matter today? Because technology has caught up with the abyss. It is no longer impossible to find a needle in a haystack if you have the right magnet. Think about the economic heartbeat of the world. Every single day, over $10 trillion in financial transactions pass through these cables. 10 trillion. That is the equivalent of the entire GDP of several major nations combined every 24 hours. This is the SWIFT system, the backbone of international banking. Now imagine a scenario where a group of coordinated actors cuts just 3 or 4 key cables. What happens next? The markets don't just dip, they freeze. You go to the ATM and it tells you connection error. You try to pay for gas with your card and the transaction is declined. The just-in-time supply chain begins to seize up. Food stops moving, medicine stops moving. Do you understand the sociological impact of this? We are not talking about a weekend without Netflix. We are talking about the total collapse of the urban survival system within 78 hours. Why is this a trap? Because we have optimized for efficiency, but we have completely forgotten about resilience. To explain this fragility, I want to use a simple analogy. Imagine your house. You have a beautiful kitchen, a high-tech office, but all of these depend on a single thin wire running from the street into your basement. If a neighbor accidentally snips that wire while gardening, your entire high-tech life goes dark. Now, imagine that wire isn't in your yard, but in a vast, dark forest. That is the global internet. The forest is the ocean, and the neighbors are hostile nation-states who are currently wandering through the trees with scissors. Do you see the problem? We have outsourced our security to the sheer vastness of the sea. But the sea is no longer a hiding place. It has become a highway for those who wish to do harm. This brings us to the second pillar of our analysis, the rise of gray zone warfare. In the past, if you wanted to hurt an enemy, you had to declare war. But today, the most effective way to paralyze a nation is through gray zone tactics. These are actions that fall below the threshold of open conflict but cause massive damage. Why is the ocean floor the perfect place for this? Because of the attribution problem. If a cable is cut in the middle of the Atlantic, was it a fishing trawler making a mistake? Was it an underwater landslide? Or was it a specialized Russian submarine equipped with a robotic arm? By the time you investigate, the culprit is 1,000 miles away. You can't launch a missile at a maybe. This creates a state of permanent vulnerability where our enemies can bleed us dry, one glass thread at a time, without ever firing a single bullet. Have you noticed the increased presence of scientific research vessels loitering? They aren't just looking at the fish, they are mapping the veins of the world. Let's look at a historical experiment in communication warfare. During World War I, one of the very first acts of the British Navy was to send a ship called the Telconia. Its mission was simple. Find the 5 German telegraph cables that connected Germany to the rest of the world and cut them. Within hours of the war starting, Germany was effectively isolated from the global conversation. They could no longer talk to their embassies. The impact was devastating. It forced Germany to use radio, which was easily intercepted. Fast forward to today, the stakes are 1,000,000 times higher. In 1914, it was about telegrams. In 2026, it is about the very oxygen of our economy. If you lose the cables, you lose the war before it even begins. Do you understand why our rivals are so obsessed with this? They know that the easiest way to win is to make sure the other side can't even pick up the phone. But it isn't just about the internet. We also have to talk about energy. Beneath the waves lies a massive network of pipelines carrying natural gas and oil, and increasingly high-voltage power cables. Have you heard of the Nord Stream incident? In September 2022, underwater explosions destroyed the pipelines. To this day, there is no official consensus on who did it. But the message was sent loud and clear. The infrastructure on the seabed is not safe. Why is this important for you? Because as we transition to green energy, we are more dependent on subsea cables than ever. If you live in Europe or parts of Asia, your lights might stay on because of a cable running under the sea. If that cable is cut, the transition stops. The grid fails. Can you imagine the chaos of a winter where the power doesn't just flicker, but disappears? This leads us to a terrifying geographical reality: the choke points. There are certain places in the world where the veins of the earth are forced to bunch together. Think of the Strait of Malacca, the Suez Canal, or the Luzon Strait. It is like having all the nerves pass through a thin neck. If a deep-sea accident happens in one of these choke points, it doesn't just affect one country, it affects continents. For example, almost all the traffic between Europe and Asia passes through the Red Sea. If that area becomes a no-go zone, the digital heart has a stroke. Why aren't we talking about this more? Because it is invisible. We take the cloud for granted, but the cloud is actually a series of tubes buried in the mud. But here is where the story takes a darker turn. It isn't just about cutting the cables, it is about tapping them. In the 1970s, the United States conducted a top-secret mission called Operation Ivy Bells. Today, that technology has evolved. We are talking about acoustic sensing and optical tapping. If a state-sponsored actor can sit on a cable, they can potentially mirror the data of an entire nation. They can see the financial flows, the diplomatic secrets, and the personal data of millions. Do you see the pattern? The ocean floor is not just a place for destruction. It is the ultimate vantage point for the shadow war. And right now, the shadows are getting longer. We must also consider the repair gap. Fixing a cable in the deep ocean is not like fixing a power line on your street. It requires highly specialized ships, of which there are very few in the world. These ships have to find the break, pick up the cable with a grapnel. It can take weeks. Now, imagine if 5 cables break at once. The repair ships are overwhelmed. The backlog grows. If a hostile actor follows the repair ship and cuts the cable again the moment they leave, what do you do? This is the asymmetric nightmare. It costs a few $1,000s to cut a cable, but it costs millions and weeks to fix it. Why would an enemy fight your navy when they can just bankrupt you? But there is a specific vessel, a ghost in the machine, that the public is not supposed to know about. It carries a set of tools designed for a very specific type of surgery. And the moment that surgery begins, the lights don't just dim. They go out in a calculated sequence. Do you want to know what happens in the first 60 seconds of a global subsea blackout? The answer is not what you expect, and it involves a secret hidden at the bottom of the Atlantic for 40 years. Specifically, I am talking about a class of vessels like the Russian Losharik or the Yantar, which carries smaller submersibles capable of diving to 6,000 meters. Why is that important? Because almost all the world's critical cables are within that range. For 40 years, the major powers have been playing a game of cat and mouse on the seabed. But the game has recently changed from passive observation to active preparation. In the first 60 seconds, you wouldn't see an explosion. You wouldn't hear a siren. Instead, you would witness the silent digital disintegration of the modern world. Imagine that first minute. In the first 10 seconds, localized packet loss begins. At 30 seconds, the BGP starts to freak out. It tries to reroute the world's data through paths that no longer exist. This creates what we call routing loops. The internet begins to eat itself. By the 60-second mark, the most critical system of all starts to fail, the Network Time Protocol, or NTP. We take time for granted, don't we? But for global finance and power grids, time is everything. If the cables connecting the world's time servers are cut, the clocks begin to drift. Even a millisecond of drift can cause a cascade of failed trades and stock market crashes. The stock market doesn't just crash, it stops existing. Do you see the problem? We have built a world that requires absolute synchronization tethered to the mud. Let's talk about the power grid. Subsea interconnectors allow countries to share electricity. The North Sea Link connects Norway to the UK. Why is this important? Because as we move toward renewable energy, we are no longer self-sufficient. If a hostile actor cuts an interconnector during high demand, the frequency of the national grid can drop in seconds. Guess what happens next? Automatic load shedding. The lights go out in hospitals, water treatment plants, and homes. This isn't just about losing your internet connection. It is about losing your ability to pump water and keep the heat on. We are trading security for efficiency. Imagine a hospital that has no medicine in storage, relying on a constant stream of drones. If someone starts catching the drones with a simple net, the hospital becomes a morgue. Our global economy is that hospital. Our drones are the subsea cables. And the man with the net is a specialized submarine. Your security is a thin veneer. Now, let's look at who actually owns these veins. The ownership of the ocean floor has been privatized. Big tech companies like Google and Meta are now the owners. Google alone has invested in over 15 subsea cables. They are building their own private internet. If a cable owned by a private company is tapped or cut, do they have a legal obligation to tell you? We are entering an era of corporate sovereignty over the seabed. Power is being concentrated where there is no transparency. Let's look at a phenomenon happening right now. The mystery of the missing sensors. Massive underwater observatories off the coasts of Norway and Canada have simply vanished, ripped from the seabed. No one saw it happen. But these sensors were located where foreign submarines frequently transit. This isn't just research. This is battlefield preparation. Our enemies are clearing the underwater eyes so they can move their cutters and tappers undetected. The attack has already begun. We are in the pre-kinetic phase. Imagine you realize that someone has been coming into your yard every night to unscrew your porch lights. They haven't broken in yet, but they are making sure you will be in total darkness. That is what is happening on the ocean floor. The public remains focused on the front door of cyber attacks and border disputes. We are ignoring the most obvious threat because it is buried under 3 miles of salt water. What about the repair gap? There are fewer than 60 dedicated repair ships in the entire world. Recently, cables in the Red Sea were damaged, reportedly by an anchor from a ship that had been attacked. For weeks, repairs were impossible because the area was a combat zone. This gave us a tiny preview of the future. If a major power decides to cut multiple cables simultaneously, hostile actors don't need to stay and fight. They just need to create enough instability to prevent repairs. The economic damage would be compounding. It is like having a heart attack while the ambulance is stuck in a deliberate traffic jam. This is strategy. How long could your city survive without the internet? Not just without social media, but without digital logistics for food and water? After 48 hours of a total communication collapse, the social contract begins to dissolve. Panic buying starts. Without the ability to communicate, the government cannot coordinate. You are left in a local bubble. This is the goal of subsea sabotage. It is not to occupy your land, but to atomize your society. If you can't talk to the next town, you can't organize a defense. The ocean is the ultimate tool for deglobalization via destruction. Why will the next attack be under the ocean? Because it is the perfect crime. Low cost, high impact, and targets the single most vulnerable point in our entire civilization, glass threads foundation. While we argue about the cloud, our rivals are investing in the mud. They are building the specialized submersibles, robotic cutters, and acoustic tappers that will define the 2030s. They are looking to make aircraft carriers irrelevant by cutting data streams. Your independence is tied to those cables. We must demand that our governments prioritize seabed sovereignty. We must invest in a massive fleet of repair ships. We must build redundancy into our networks, even if it is less efficient. Reality is physical. The blue void is actually a crowded battlefield. The veins of the world are pulsing right now, miles beneath the surface, carrying every thought, every dollar, and every secret. And in the dark, silent abyss, someone is holding a pair of scissors. The next time you look at the ocean, don't just see the waves. See the glass. The attack won't be televised because the television won't work. It will be silent. It will be cold. I am Professor Jiang, and the clock is already ticking at the bottom of the sea.